Welcome everyone. The time is now 7:05 p.m. on December 4th. I now call this meeting to order. Counselors, please head to Echo 360 to record your attendance. The session ID is noted in the agenda. All right, thank you, counselors. So just some comments from me before we move on with this meeting. So just a friendly reminder to please state your name before speaking into the mic when you're called upon. Also, please remember to vote on all of the motions, regardless if you're abstaining, rejecting, or voting for a motion. It is important that you vote. And then please remain seated at all times during session. So if you need a break, you are welcome to put forward a motion for a short recess, but outside of that, you shouldn't be like getting up and like just going about, just so that we can maintain an atmosphere where people can be like voting and it's quiet when we're voting or quiet when we're discussing. All right, we will first move on to our executive presentations, starting with President Kalajian, if you'd like to come up.
Hey everybody, how's everyone feeling prior to exams? Good, bad, ugly? I was in Ottawa this past week and there was actually no snow there. And so I came back last night and was thoroughly happy. And then I started walking to campus today and I was sad. So yeah, the highlight of my week, I think, was definitely CASA. We had a great time, me and Michelle, VP vacation, as we've been saying. Listen, she's been very hard at work. She was in, she'll tell you about it when she gets up here. So that was really wonderful. Got to meet a lot of other student unions. I met the Prime Minister, which was super cool, and Jagmeet Singh on the street. He was riding a bicycle, and I said, hey! And we talked about how he went to Western, and it was a great experience. So very happy about that. Oh, I forgot to say, asked me about, I got a last minute ticket to see Taylor Swift. That was awesome. I went by myself, and when I got there were two girls in my row that went to Western who I knew. So There's alumni everywhere. Next highlight was we dressed up as our full-time staff for Halloween. So as some of you guys might know, we actually have 60 full-time staff who work at the USC. So we selected some pretty signature outfits that we wanted to wear. I dressed up as Jeff, our COO. I wore a pair of Daniel shorts and called it a day. Next thing is the sustainability panel. So in January, I'm going to be sitting on a panel with Western Sustainability, and I feel like I'm breathing into this mic. I'm so sorry. Which is really cool. We're going to be talking about the new strategic plan they have out. We're going to talk about what students' attitudes are towards sustainability, and I really encourage you to go. It's on January 20th at the McKellar Theater. And some updates. So I first want to thank all the counselors who came forward and had really productive conversations about the MAP 1.1 policy. We were able to summarize all that data and bring it forward to administration, which I really do appreciate you taking the time. We also sent out a survey to our clubs just to get some more information about how students were initially feeling about the policy in general. We had a conversation with Cameron Siddiqui and John Dirksen about the policy in itself. There will be an update in the next semester with a new drafted policy that we'll be able to have some consultation about with as well. But that's kind of all the updates I have, and any questions I'm happy to take. Next is the EDI committee. So thank you to Saad who came out. So he's the council rep for our internal EDI committee, but just wanted to update you. So it's really more about our internal staff, but I think getting a counselor perspective is really wonderful. So we appreciate you taking the time. We have some plans as to how we're going to be implementing that. Shreya is actually going to be talking about some things we're working on too, which is really exciting. But most importantly, I think it's just nice to have representation from all facets of the USC come together and talk about how we can make this workplace in particular a bit more inclusive. Next, I'm actually on the committee for the renewal of the student code of conduct. Can't really talk about anything more than that, but just wanted to let you know that I'm there. And if there's room for conversations with students about some of the current policies that do exist, of course, we'll be open with you all and have that kind of conversation. And then the faculty council. So if you're a faculty council president, you would know that we just put the first installment through. So thank you for sending over your budgets. And next thing is we're going to be putting QR codes on the Free the Dot dispensers. So if you're in a bathroom and there's a dispenser that is empty and you see a QR code, please let us know. And I'm not sure when they're going to be up. I think in the next month or so. Around that time. I'll get you a better framework once I know. But we printed them out. They got approved by FM, so everything's moving forward. But we basically wanted to do that so we could gather some data as to what bathrooms are being used the most and so on and so forth. And next we have the President's Dinner, which is on Friday. So if you're a faculty council president, I will be seeing you on Friday for some din-din, free dinner, always fun, and we'll be getting to spill the tea. Okay, and the last thing was that the budget process has begun. So did a presentation with our governance and finance committee, sort of talked about what the ground rules are for the budget, how you can be involved in the process, what kind of questions you can ask, and what it really means to be a counselor and your interactions with the budget and things on that. So that's all I had to say. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Just wondering, what exactly is the USC's involvement in CASA this year?
Yeah, so we're observers. Michelle can probably answer this a little bit better than I can, but I'll give it a go. It's just there's observer status and then there's like member status. So currently we're observers. So we're not official in that regard, but we get to go to all of their conferences and things along those lines. And it still gives us access to politicians and also what their strategic plan is on federal advocacy. But I think when Michelle comes up here, if you want the more nitty gritty, I think that's definitely her field of expertise, and I don't want to speak on behalf of her, but I hope that helps just for now. Yeah? Any other questions? Okay, good, great, thanks.
Thank you, President Kalajian. I now invite Vice President Batista up to provide her report.
Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. I'll try and keep this brief. So for my Ask Me About, I didn't get to see Taylor Swift, but I am gonna see Coldplay next year and I'm really excited about that. That was my one bucket list item I really wanted to do is go to Coldplay concert. So I'm going with my family, so that'll be fun. Some highlights, Battle of the Bands was great. We went I went with the exec team and got to listen to live music. The USC exec holiday photo shoot was also really fun. We got matching sweaters. So yeah. And I lied about the third one. We haven't had the holiday party yet. It's tomorrow. For our full-time staff. We are going to be going out and having some fun. But I guess another highlight is I also got laser eye surgery, so I don't need glasses anymore. And yeah. Oh my gosh! Thanks, guys. Oh, that's so nice. All right, so for updates, the Western University EDIDA strategic plan just came out. There was the launch party this morning that I went to with Shreya, and you can find it online as well. And so I'm going to be working with the different departments at Western on ensuring its implementation, and just making sure that any gaps are also addressed. Similar note on for Western University's mental health strategic plan, we have our last advisory committee meeting later in December. So after that meeting, it should be good to be brought forth to Senate. And yeah. Next is the Beryl Ivy Library closure. There's been some concerns with the former Brescia Library closing its space. So currently they're in the process of moving those resources onto main campus, and so students can access those at Western libraries. However, the space itself is still closed to students, so they cannot use it currently to study or for other reasons. So I've been having some conversations with the provost. In terms of the timeline for moving those resources, 2/3 of them are already accessible. So by January to late winter is when all the resources should be moved. But after that, there aren't any specific plans for that space. So I made sure to vocalize that students are, looking for more study spaces on campus, especially making it difficult for students who still have classes going on the former campus. So the provost is going to be having conversations with the AVP, the AVP Institutional Planning and Budgeting to provide a timeline and future plans for the space. So I'll update you on that as I get them. And then the Wellness Equity and Accessibility Committee. So we just closed applications. So I'm working with my coordinator to hire the committee and talk about our goals and plans for next semester. And then finally, I was a part of the Accessible Employment Forum for Careers and Experience. So I moderated a panel and I interviewed a number of employers that value accessibility in their workplaces. And so that was really great, and I was really thankful for that opportunity. Some upcoming things. So with the food security survey, it's still open, and it's going to be open until the end of December. We've gotten over almost 1,000 responses on that, so that was really great. And next semester, we're going to be working on developing some more recommendations to have a setup for the advocacy for future years, as we've never had any recommendations on food security before. Advocacy Day and Menstrual Equity Day, we're planning that right now. It'll be happening next semester. And then I'm working with Michelle and some of our full-time staff to talk about the position papers up for renewal next semester, and figuring out what the directions of those papers are going to look like, consulting with the university stakeholders. And then finally, I'm on the ombudsperson hiring committee. So I'm tasked with reviewing applications and basically being a part of that hiring process for the position. So we'll have a new ombudsperson by February of 2025. And those are all of my updates. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, yes.
Regarding the library closure, could you speak to any reasoning why it was closed in the first place, or is that still?
From what I was told, it's mainly with the transferring of resources. They closed it down so that they'd be able to kind of utilize the space and students wouldn't have to be in that space while they're moving things and packing things to be moved to main campus. Although I'm still trying to get a clear answer so I can get back to you on that specifically, and figuring out if there is potential to open it up soon now that most of the resources have already been moved, but I'll get back to you on that. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, quick question regarding the Menstrual Equity Day planning.
Yeah.
Was just wondering what the status right now is on like the Free to Thought project, which has been paused for a bit, and what the plans are looking like for that day especially.
So the purpose of the Menstrual Equity Day is to familiarize students with the Free the Dot as an advocacy project. Also, just doing like awareness around gender and menstrual equity. Currently, with Free the Dot, of course, we're still looking to advocate for more permanent funding. Currently, we're still working off of the grant that we got from Western, the initial $800,000, and basically we're just like in the works of now figuring out what's going to happen after that grant is over. And yeah, so we're still kind of having those consultations with stakeholders. But do you want to speak more to that, Emily? Because yeah.
Really quick, Free the Dot isn't paused. The program is still ongoing. There's still dispensers that are being refilled. The thing that got paused, and quite frankly, what we want to replace is the hamper program, because it's to put so much emphasis on the student councils having to take leadership. And I know from Shreya's experience when she was VP Advocacy on Social Science, she was the one that was filling the machine. So we want to utilize dispensers properly. We want to make sure that they're efficient, they're in proper locations and being filled up, which is what our next step is with the QR code. So just want to reiterate, the program is not paused. It's very much still ongoing. What we don't know next is like we talked about with financial longevity. So those are in the plans right now. We've talked to the budget and finance team at Western. And these are conversations that I had at the last council meeting as well. So yeah, just to reiterate, not paused.
Yeah, if you were talking about the menstrual hamper program, we're trying to focus our efforts now on Free the Dot specifically, so that the hamper program ultimately can be taken over by Free the Dot. But
Yeah, just to clarify, primarily mentioning the hamper program, which I believed to be under the same project, but that was my main concern because like last year as well, I was like helping out in the distribution. So I was just wondering where we were at, but thank you for clarification.
you're welcome. Are there any other questions? Okay, awesome. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Vice President Batista. I now invite Vice President Watchis Johnson up to provide her report.
Fantastic pronunciation. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'll go through and then I will address Mauritius's question when I get to the part where I talk about it. But my top three, okay, well, my Ask Me About is all the reasons you should run for my job. Guys, EA is the one that the least people want to be. And I think I have a really cool and great and fun job. So this is my PSA to please talk to me about my job and ask me about all the reasons why I think it's cool. My top three highlights, one of them is USA SAC, which is what we call Lobby Week. It stands for Student Advocacy Conference. Essentially, it's all of USA goes to Toronto. There's 18 of us, and we just lobby our provincial MPPs for a week straight. I think it went really well. It's also in my updates, but definitely a highlight to just spend like 6 days straight with all of my USA people. We also had the USA alumni event during that week, had a lot of fun at that, got to see a lot of past Western people, meet some fun Western alumni that I've never gotten to meet before, meet some USA Home Office alumni too, one of which is my city councilor in Mississauga, so that was really fun. And then also Laurier campus visit. It was our last campus visit of the semester, so me and the executive director got a little treat after. We had some very, very productive conversations with their admin, although my visit there was the day before the Western versus Laurier football game, so they had a lot to say to me, and I did lose a bet, so I have to wear a Laurier t-shirt at the next USA event, and that's really embarrassing. In terms of updates, my portfolio ran a housing rights fair. I think this was very, very early in November, like shortly after the last council meeting, but I feel like it went pretty well. We got some good student feedback in terms of what their main concerns are with housing. And then we also had a lot of informational booths there to kind of talk to students about what their rights are when it comes to student housing. I also have USA SAC up here. So for context, I've also been gone for 2 weeks. I've been out of office for 18 days, got back today. The first week of that was doing lobbying in Toronto with USA. So we had their key topics were post-secondary education, like investment, so making sure that more money is being given from the government to universities, but also from the government towards OSAP. And then also food insecurity, housing, and responses on campus to hate-motivated attacks. We also had our federal lobby week, which we did through CASA. So to address Mauritius's question from earlier, essentially the way CASA works is 2 years ago, we signed up to be observers of the organization. So we don't pay the full membership fee. It was a $200 fee. And it kind of gives our organization the chance to see what CASA is all about, and attend all of their conferences, but we don't have voting rights when we're there. But we are still able to participate in the conversations and the consultations, both about their priorities in terms of what they're advocating on, but also their strategic priorities as an organization. The referendum failed, which means we're not going to become full members, but the observership period is 2 years. So we're technically still observers this year, which is why Emily and I have been attending the conferences. Because truly, like, CASA is a very like well-oiled GR machine. I think we've learned so much from them in terms of government relations strategies and how to lobby, and we've learned so much from the other student unions from across the country. So it has been a really great experience, and we've also done a lot of work to make sure that their priorities do include some things that really affect university students in Ontario specifically, because it's such a huge organization. So yeah, that's why we go. I hope that answers that. Yeah, and then we'll no longer be a part of CASA next year because our observership expires in March. So they have one more conference, but there's no point in me going because I don't have a vote. Anyway, so spent a week in Ottawa doing that, was the summary of that. And then also the position paper, finalized that throughout the last little bit of November, did a little bit more research in response to what my standing committee had to say, and then obviously we'll be talking about it more today. So those are my main updates. In terms of upcoming, with USA, we have quite a few provincial follow-up meetings from our week of lobbying there. So some conversations that were started and never finished, specifically when it comes to institutional funding models. So like the agreements that the province makes with every university about how they fund us and how they determine that funding. We're having some conversations about that. And then a lot of planning for next semester. That's kind of what my whole December is going to go towards, planning things including Local Advocacy Week, Women in House, and Advocacy Day, which will be in early January. Very excited for all of those. And then also starting to work on my spring policy paper for USA. So last semester, I authored twice at USA. In the spring, I'm going to be authoring Comprehensive Access Strategy with one of my coordinators. And we're going to start working on our recommendations for that this week. So any other questions / follow-ups? Yeah?
Hi, thank you. Just a quick question about thank you for clarifying the CASA position. Do we have plans to renew the 2-year observer thing, or is that a next year problem?
So the way that CASA works, in their policies, you have to take a 1-year period in between observerships. So even if I wanted to renew it, I can't. I'm going to write a very, very comprehensive report that can be passed down towards future VPEAs so that they can consider what avenues they want to use for their federal advocacy going forward. I'll give them all the pros, I'll give them all the cons, and then the decision's kind of out of my hands at that point.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Was there another question over there? Or anywhere else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Vice President Fullerton up to provide her report.
Hey guys, how's it going? So my top 3 highlights, number 1 is booking the Purple Frost artist. I'm very excited to announce this one. The announcement is going to go up soon. I can't tell you when, but soon. So keep your eyes on our Western USC Instagram for some very exciting news. And all I'll say is prepare to get tickets. And then number 2, direction of USC programming. So I feel like after orientation, it's such a big thing. And then I think I felt not lost necessarily, but just a lack of, I'd say, purpose in a lot of my programming, in the sense that I felt like a lot of the programs I was giving my attention to were more of the smaller things. And obviously those are extremely important, but I think what I've realized is that clubs and my coordinators and honestly every student group on campus puts on so many programs that my programs were one of so many that it wasn't necessarily serving a unique student need or purpose. So in second semester, I'm really going to focus my efforts on doing bigger programs and things that every single student can enjoy, but on like a much bigger scale. So that's what I'm putting my efforts toward in second semester. And I feel like once I realized that and decided that, I feel like there was like a cloud that like disappeared over my head. So I'm very excited for all the next semester's programming, and I feel like you guys will really like it. And then number 3 is I medal the incoming LST as a group, and they're just such a fun, awesome bunch. So I'm super excited for them. And then my updates, obviously I hired the incoming LST. We had our first social. They started their training. November 28th was their first training. Can I take questions in the middle? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had 2 questions. You said that LST, faculty LST, were going to be full year from now going forward. So how does that change the training process, and are there any differences?
For the most part, no, as in like there's not many changes. All of the LST undergo training, same with SOFs, that's directed by student experience. So that's Western, not the USC side, which makes sense since Western is obviously the academic institution. We trust them with the training. So for the most part, LST have undergone very intense training, even with it being a 1-week term right now. So they will undergo all the same exact training. It's just that their contracts will be for the full year. So basically no changes there. Yeah, no problem. And then in second semester, they'll have a lot more training as well. So Movember initiatives, this is what I mean when I say I felt like a lot of the programs weren't necessarily hitting the mark. So we did have 2 speakers come for Movember. One of them was a former Olympian. He was a rower named Adam Creek. He offered a free workout session for students, and then also a talk on general men's mental health and the connection and importance between physical health and mental health. And then our second speaker of the month was Brian Cuban, Mark Cuban's brother, if any of you keep up with sports. He's like the owner of the Dallas something. I think it's a football team. Something like that. He's a sports dude. I don't know. Anyway, so Brian Cuban is his brother, and something that I really wanted to focus Movember efforts on this year was male eating disorders. So he came in and he spoke specifically about male eating disorders, and then also talked about general addiction and the importance and emphasis on community in recovery. So that was a really interesting talk. And then Movember.com and Faculty Face Off were part of the initiative to really grow Movember and make it a USC like huge thing. But what I realized with creating that is that a lot of soft teams, for example, or general clubs do Movember themselves. And so because everyone was doing Movember themselves, there was really no need to have a streamlined effort through the USC in the sense that people didn't want to participate in the Faculty Face Off and Movember.com like team signups. So I quickly learned that wasn't the direction that students were telling us they wanted to go in. So we just switched gears, and those events did not happen, but we still did the speaker events. So we definitely still did stuff for Movember. And then Battle of the Bands, Puppy Yoga, and Craft Night, Vintage on Campus were all very successful rinse and repeat events that happen, hopefully will continue happening, but has happened last year and then continued on this year. And then upcoming, we're doing general soft hiring, and then Purple Frost, which is going to be the first week back in January, full of a bunch of fun events, which is part of the concert. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled on our Instagram for that. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, yeah, this is just going back to the thing you were talking about earlier with faculty softs having the year-long contract. Is there like any change in the way the contract is structured or like the content of it, or is it just like that it exists for a longer period of time?
Great question. So this I've had many extensive meetings about with many different orientation stakeholders. So part of the contract is going to change where we explicitly lay out some new expectations for the year-long commitment. And in particular, one of the major changes, if not like the major change, is that faculty soft teams as a whole will be responsible for putting on a minimum of 3 events per semester. So those can be whatever events the future of EPOP and that team decide to put on. It'll also vary faculty to faculty based on student needs. But that is the major change, and that is specifically outlined in the contract. No problem. Any other questions? Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. I now invite Vice President Clapper up to provide his report.
What's up, guys? I have an iPad now, so I'm going to be looking down a lot more. So I'll start off with the, give them a sec here. No worries. I'll start off with the ask me about. So you can ask me about the Black Friday deals. So I did a lot of shopping on Black Friday, actually, surprisingly. It was actually all the week before, too, so I found some pretty good deals. So if you're ever curious as to where all my new outfits came from, now you know I spent a ton of money on Black Friday. So top 3 highlights. So we were happy to launch the grocery shuttle. That was pretty cool. I was lucky enough to ride it. I took the first ride on it with my AVP Wade. We made a cool video about it. That was super awesome. The applications of AI in research and writing, we hosted that last Tuesday. Yeah, last Tuesday, and we had a full house. So we did it over in the new entrepreneurship space, and there were people coming in like halfway through the session at the beginning, but we really had like a great turnout. A lot of people engaged. We had a nice competition at the end where everyone submitted something. So that really tells me that there's still people out there who are looking for it. We even had some faculty who came out, faculty staff. So 2 professors were there and then some other Western admin as well who were just kind of curious about the topic, which tells me that it's kind of seeping into the Western admin as well. So they're kind of catching track on that information and looking into how they can maybe apply it to their own professors and teach the professors how to work with students. So maybe look out for that session coming up soon. Another highlight was the plans for next year. So we've had a couple conversations and we've been working on like what next year is going to look like, adding some portfolios, changing some stuff up. I think it's super exciting and you guys will be very happy to hear when we do eventually announce what the changes are. My updates. So the grocery store shuttle, the test period is happening right now. So we're only going until next week will be the last time it's running. We're going to look to see feedback on rider numbers, see how many people were actually on the bus. We're going to get all those figures from the bus company itself. We also have some pretty extensive feedback forms that we've got from students telling us about like where it stopped, how the ride was. And so far from the students who are actually on the bus, we've got some great feedback about the overall experience and about the destinations and the pickup spots in general. Partnership with Morissette, so that's exciting. So the next AI session is going to be on January 29th. We're lucky enough to have a fantastic speaker. His name is Salim Teja. He's a venture capitalist from Toronto who works in artificial intelligence and private equity, also a Western grad from Ivy. So we're going to be partnering with Morissette Institute for Entrepreneurship on this one to host a session on applications of AI in business and entrepreneurship. It's going to kind of be a dual speaker series, I guess. So it's going to be part of their Desjardins speaker series on top of a USC collab. So we'll run our event. Salim will do his talk. It'll be fantastic. And then there'll also be some Morissette people there to give some advice. Food support. So this one's huge. They're running their annual food drive at the moment. So if any of you happen to be in your faculty building and you see a box with the food support logo on it, there's like a QR code you can fill out as well. We're starting that this week. It's a great competition, great way to get involved. And I think every counselor, president, observer in the crowd, Gazette, everyone here should be participating as well. Everyone's got at least one can at home that's been sitting at the back for the last 2 years that you're just like saving for a rainy day. And it's better used at the food support center than it is in your cupboard. So I think you should donate it and possibly win a prize. There's an option to kind of log what you put in. So if you bring a ton of cans, you can kind of scan the QR code, go onto the Excel sheet and take a picture of yourself with the cans or just take a picture of the cans. And the person who brings the most cans will win a private dinner at the Wave for 5. So if you have like a house with 5 people and you guys want to try to snag that prize up, go for it. I think it's awesome. We're also giving away some hoodies, some beanies, and some other cool stuff. So that'll be happening until the end of the exam season. So definitely check that out. And faculty, you should be promoting that on your Instagram as well, because I think it's a fantastic opportunity. And the box is like very evidently at the like front entrance of all of your buildings. So look out for that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I can give you a detailed answer of exactly where the box is if you can't find it for some reason. Also, the recognition and awards for students this year are changing a little bit. So we've added a little bit more funding to this program this year. We're really trying to recognize students for the awesome things that they do. So we're going to be having some scholarships that will be coming out in January. I have Azad, my coordinator working hard on those applications at the moment, trying to figure out exactly like what types of awards we're putting out. Definitely look out for some awards for like grad school. So if you're someone who will be applying to law school, if you'll be applying to medicine, or if you're applying to like a master's, there will be a scholarship available for you to kind of help you cover the costs of doing your LSAT, your MCAT, whatever other costs are associated with that. And then some other awards as well for students just who are doing awesome things on campus. So I'm super excited about that. That's all I have for updates. Upcoming is almost the same thing. So just the holiday food drive, keep an eye out for that. Faculty council involvement, stay involved, get in there, and then look out for more peer AI sessions that are coming up. Next one is January 29th. The link for the balance will go out in about 2 weeks and people can start signing up. So that's it for me. Thank you guys. Yeah, questions?
Sorry, quick question regarding the faculty council involvement.
Yeah.
Are you expecting us to like promote the post, or are we expected to do further things?
Yeah, well, you're not expected in the sense that if you don't, there will be consequences. It's more that it's like, just be kind, be nice-hearted people. Like you have the opportunity to repost it. If you don't, there will be no repercussions. But it'd be fantastic if you could as well, because the students who are going into your buildings will see it, but they might not really understand what it's for. And so you guys posting about it might be like, oh, like, hey, this is science. Who's helping out, or like they're involved somehow, because everyone's somehow under the umbrella of the USC. So not like mandatory or anything, but the more cans, the better, because it all goes back into the hands of students. So
will the faculty councils be getting an email with like the post by any chance?
Yeah, honestly, you don't have to build a post or anything.
If we want.
If you want to, I can send you like a package logo or a logo package, so you can like use the food support PNG if you want to make your own. You can always just repost the food support one, or even just post a picture of the box and say donate. Up to you, really. You can freestyle it. There's no quota for how many cans we need. It's as many as we get. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
A quick question about the grocery store shuttle.
Sure.
I will say some of my first year friends came up to me with a Gazette article that talked about it, and they were like, oh, this is cool, can we try it out? And they did try it, they loved it. And they were wondering if this is a test period, and if we do get positive feedback, when will it come back? Is there a plan coming?
It'll be back as soon as students are back. So we're just stopping it when like the Christmas break happens. So the trial period was from 4 weeks ago until Christmas break, so December 20th-ish. We're not going to be running it like in the Christmas break, obviously, but I will still be looking at the data of like how many students used it, and then we'll make a decision probably next week. So last night it ran, and so now we have a way better understanding of like 4 total weeks, how many students have used it, and then we can do like a cost per student, get the feedback and make a decision. But I'll probably decide by next week if we're running it in January as well, especially with like all the snow that's happening now. There's like more than ever, there's like a reason to do it. And even though the roads might be a bit bumpy, I think it's still a service that's definitely needed for students.
100%, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I ended up noticing, because when my soft friends at Elgin was talking about his first years,
Yep.
and not a lot of them found out about it, and a lot of them regret missing out on it.
Yeah.
Is there any plan to advertise specifically to first years and those in suite style residences?
Yeah, definitely. So I already reached out last week to housing, and they're going to be working to promote that on their Instagram. So they did post it 2 weeks ago on the main housing Instagram, but we're also going to work with the councils, the res councils, to kind of promote a little bit. It's a little bit difficult sometimes to get posters into the residence buildings because their restrictions are kind of high on like what can be advertised, and it takes a while to get it up on their screens. But the people over at housing actually had reached out to me, so there is an interest for it. So I think that'll be something that's very easy to input. We also just didn't want to advertise it too much in the beginning in the residences, just in case we decided that the test period, something happened, students weren't using it. Then we didn't want students to be confused when January comes back that there's this permanent poster saying grocery shuttle every Tuesday 6 to 9, and we have to go back and take them out. So if we decide next week to continue with the grocery shuttle, we'll definitely work on a plan to get it into residence, especially with the map, to make it very evident where the pickups and drop-offs happen. I know there's some confusion about that as well, but those were just like the kinks that needed to be worked out in the first 2 weeks. But just to reiterate, it's the Alumni Hall Circle, it's the Elgin Hall back roundabout, and then it's also the O Hall roundabout, pickup and drop-off. So anytime you see that driver's seat bus and it stops, and you're in one of those 3 locations, you can hop on or hop off, and then you have basically 3 hours to grocery shop. Any other questions? Yes.
Just in terms of the increased like scholarships and awards with recognition and awards, is there an increased budget in that from last year, or are you just reallocating current scholarships and minimizing some costs from there onto other ones?
Yeah, no, there's no like increase in the overall budget. We've just allocated more money into grants and recognitions so that we can give grants out to clubs and individuals, but also have some money in the account so that we can give out scholarships for the students as well. So no like new increase in the overall student services budget, just some reallocation of the funds. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just going back to the CAN drive for a second, did you say that the boxes have already been delivered to the different faculty buildings?
Not yet, no. So the food support team is working on that right now. We tried to get like some donations of boxes, but they were all like super small in different sizes, so we thought it would make more sense if we just ordered some online for like $12. So those are coming in tomorrow, and then once we have like uniform size boxes, we can print them out. So she will be working on that probably until Friday, getting them out into the area. If anyone, I know that not every single building on campus has one, just because it's a lot of boxes and then it's a lot of work for the student volunteers to kind of like go back and forth. If there's any like building that students are prominently in that you guys know about, that might be a good spot, please email me, because we can always change the location of the box to somewhere that you guys think there might be more traffic. I know FIMS had reached out to us, so we put one in the FIMS building. So I don't know if there's one in the music building actually, but if we want to get one in there, we could definitely do that. But yeah, any other questions? Cool, thanks guys.
Go ahead.
So sorry, I just want to pass my speaking rights over to Sarah to clarify something really quickly.
Sorry, guys. I'm going to backtrack here. I just want to make sure I'm fully answering your question, Tessa. So I just checked my documents, and I just misspoke earlier. So the soft contract actually doesn't have any changes regarding the year long because we're streamlining the soft contract. So every single soft, regardless of constituency for main campus students, will be the exact same. It's the soft position descriptions, which are varied by constituencies, and that's the one that specifies specifically the 3 events per semester. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. All right, I now invite Vice President Menon up to provide her report.
I know, they're so squeaky. Oh, stop. Someone on the full-time staff told me to put oil on my shoes, and I did, and they were actually working for a while, but I guess they're not anymore. Okay, I'll go really fast because I know we're gonna be here for a while. But okay, really quick, ask me about Exec Unfiltered. We just did a live radio show at the Spoke, and it was super fun. We gave out some free stuff for people who attended. We heard some really funny stories. Nathan, I'm looking at you. Nathan was our first volunteer and told a great story of almost falling off of a bridge, I think. So we're gonna try to run it again next semester. So if you guys can come out, please come out. It's super chill. It's like we're trying to make the Spoke a more low-key hangout place after class, so please come out. Okay, really quick, my top 3 highlights. Number 1, International Week. So that was super fun. I got to collaborate with Western International, and they had like different events every day of the week. And one of the events was an international cooking contest in Russia. So like students from like different countries each like made a dish, and then I got to judge it. That was the coolest thing I've ever done. I think that's the best thing I'll ever do as VP student engagement. I tried Eritrean food for the first time. It's really good. Anyways, number 2, USC varsity games. We did our first one this semester. It was a volleyball game. It was Western versus McMaster. We won both games. That was super fun. We're gonna run it again next semester with basketball and hockey, so you guys should come out to it. There was a t-shirt cannon, and we got to shoot t-shirts out into the thing. Ryan and Hip Hop Western did a little dance, and it was really cool. And they're performing again next semester. Serious. And Mari already mentioned this, but the Exec Christmas shoe, it was super wholesome and fun. I got to make the concept for it, so if you guys see it around campus on the screens, just know that was me. Okay, updates really quick. So the first, I kind of talked on this in the last meeting, we've planned some collaborations with Tourism London, which is this company that like works to connect like the local businesses to people living in London. So we did our first one, and that was about student discounts that students can get in London for restaurants by showing their ID. So that one is on our Instagram, and we're putting up posters around campus pretty soon. Second thing, International Week. Yeah, I kind of talked about that a little bit, but yeah, I just helped Western run it. There was stuff each day, and the USC had a little bit of help facilitate and promote it. Number three, this one is actually out of date because Music Council is also on there. As of this semester, we attended social science, science, health science, FIMS, music, engineering, and arts. So I've gotten everybody besides Ivy for faculty councils. Yeah, Saad, if you want to answer those texts. I'm kidding, don't blame Saad. Yeah, but I've been going to, for those of you who don't know, I've been going around to faculty councils. I think the goal of the student engagement portfolio is to really just talk to as many people as we want, as many people as we can to get more feedback on some stuff. So I've been going to faculty councils asking some different things. Some of you gave me some really good feedback on like how the USC can restructure our surveys, which is great. Some of you have given me feedback on some initiatives we have for next semester. So it's all really valued, and thank you for letting me come to your councils. Number 4 is I've been working with the HR team at the USC, and I'm happy to announce that the executive, for the first time, will get some comprehensive EDID training that will happen next week, actually, in December. This was an initiative that was really important to me coming into this role. I am someone that like really values EDID, and I think as executives, we are put in really interesting positions where we have to represent a lot and we have to deal with like kind of sensitive situations. So it was important to me that the executives get some kind of comprehensive EDID training, and I'm hoping to build this out into transitions for further down the line, so that it'll just be something that if you become a USC executive, you have to do some comprehensive EDID training. So it's the first time we're launching it. And the last thing I've been doing is more in-person data collection, specifically about how to improve our surveys. I don't know if you guys know this, but the USC does a lot of surveys. And we want to make sure that like when we do it, that the process works well and that people are actually, it's not the same people doing it every single time. So I've been working on that. Upcoming, I have more future Tourism London campaigns that are coming out towards the end of the semester and some for next semester. We have some social collaborations with our affiliates over there. Super excited to work with Kings and Huron next semester. Just in general, attending more club and council meetings to meet students where they're at. So like I'm doing with faculty councils, I'm trying to extend it to more clubs and other campus organizations just to kind of get the full encompassing student perspective on the stuff that the USC is doing. And last thing is we're working on the mid-year survey. So this is the first year we're doing this, but essentially we're launching sort of like a check-in on how the executive team and the USC as a whole has been doing this year so that we can get the results probably by like middle of January so it can inform the rest of our terms, but also build it out that the next generation of USC executives, but also counselors, faculty presidents, everybody, you guys can see exactly what students are, what they care about, like, so you don't have to start from scratch. So yeah, this will be launching over the break, and please fill it out if you get the chance. There'll be some cool prizes for it. And yeah, that's it for me. Any questions? Yeah, I figured not. Okay.
Thank you, Vice President Menon. I just want to give a quick point of personal privilege. Out in Mustang Lounge West is Theater Western. So if you're hearing noise and wondering what that is, that's what that is. And then and then a point of order, just before we move into our 4 action section for the meeting, is for counselors to please say their name before you start speaking, just for record-keeping purposes. Thank you. All right, and with that, we can go to our 4 action section of the meeting, starting with the motion to approve the executive reports. Sorry. Yes, Counselor. Yes, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, No. Yeah, I have to reread the motion first, and then we'll go to that. The motion reads, be it resolved that council accept the executive reports for November 2024. Can I have a seconder, please? Counselor Khan? Are there any questions regarding the motion? Are there any points of debate? Are there any objections? Okay, please proceed to Echo 360 to vote on the motion. The motion passes. I'm going to motion for a brief recess of 5 minutes, and then we will resume the meeting.
Yeah, we're supposed to vote on it. For the quarter? No. Just vote. What is like, if you lost again, fraction of you gotta. I just got to. Oh, wait. Put it down. We could have done it with. You're so fast, bro! But if you want to actually. Apparently not. What? He thought they were talking about That's all you put on. It's also possible. Well, we don't know. It's sort of, yeah, it's sort of like end of you do, end of you. That is press the city, and then from then on,
What? Is there a max? Max amount of people? I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
technically more than barriers, you just get more information.
Yeah, can I not just do my entire club?
Technically,
But I don't want to put everyone's names
we'll
down.
double check with Elena, so email that email.
Okay, okay.
There might be a max of like 20 people.
Okay.
So like you can definitely get your
I have 70 people
And I believe
on my exec team.
But that's not the whole club.
That's not the whole club.
The whole club is what? 200 people?
Like 400.
400?
Yeah.
You could make multiple teams.
We could. I'll just ask with my exec team.
Yeah.
Who am I trying to?
it's we're thinking of 10:30 to 11:30.
I tried. You hit me one time and I'm like,
That's fine.
I don't want to tell you something. I'm in. It's because it's I got all excited.
Bro, Natalie sat like this for so long.
I remember that happened to me for it. I literally remember that happened.
The natural instinct was this. I'm like, damn, wait,
I was like, I need to walk in. That was my realization phase.
Actually, I'm talking to Carl about something relevant to that too. So,
oh yeah,
catching them up with the LTC stuff like that. LTC, transit guys at London, they pushed back. That's the sort of 6 about 10 to 11. So, it sounds like what I'm going to do is we've opened up a survey to be open for longer, so we're going to get more data. We're at like almost 200, hoping to get 3 at least. But from there, I want to meet with them, hear what they got to say, and if that's a route for you guys to initiate through, I don't see why we shouldn't test my class is in, so I will be mainly I can just randomly send this something. In person? If not, you're more than welcome to send me a list of
I can send something. I run through my list of
trusted governance officials.
Trusted delegates.
But yeah, what do you call it? It's also my number one city of London that's operating. So it's pretty good. Oh my god. But yeah, quite a lot of stuff that I'm trying to get up. I'd love to work with it. So if you guys are able to, why don't you guys it's a great way for you to bring that up. I haven't had it, and I think it's smart, but regardless, we can ask if there's a way that they
Or, I mean, honestly, there's 2,000
All right, council, please take your seats. All right, welcome back, everyone. Before we continue with our 4 action section for the meeting, we will be hearing one more presentation from President Kalajian about our budgets.
That was unnecessary, Counselor, or past Counselor Ayala. Okay, so if you were in GNF, you've heard this presentation before, and I told you in that meeting that we'd be talking about this again, just because it's really important for the other counselors to understand what the budget process looks like. So this is not really going to get super in depth, but it's just going to explain what your responsibilities are and how you can kind of get engaged with the budget process. So next slide. Cool. Okay. So just to give you a timeline of what this will look like. So this is technically the November council meeting. So this is me coming to you in November. And we, as an executive, did a little retreat. I actually went to Ottawa again. And what we do every single year as an executive, sometimes we go to Toronto, sometimes we go to Ottawa, and we kind of talk about what changes should be made with respect to the team at the USC. So just to give an example, we will be adding a professional development portfolio under Daniel. And those are some things that will affect his budget lines for the next year, right? So we have those conversations then. We're actually starting about 2 months earlier than they usually do. So we're getting really ahead of the ball, which I think is really amazing. And once we kind of have the full report done there, we'll explain it, any other, more more nitty-gritty changes that we'll be making. And so then for mid-December, the budget team will then consider all the submitted proposals as well as year-over-year changes. In January, we'll have a draft and we'll start kind of pointing a little bit towards like the fee bill and things along those lines. February, parts of the budget are presented to council and the board of directors for review. So if you remember Ethan from last week, he was talking about the budget and things along those lines. So we'll be working in tandem, but you'll be getting a big presentation from me that you'll probably hear a couple of times until we get it right. But a lot of it comes from your consultation and your feedback. And then in March, April, the approved budget was presented to the Western's Board of Governors. We cannot collect any student fees without their approval, right? Because you can imagine with the student fees are collected when tuition is paid. And so that comes from BOG's approval. Next slide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, so the USC budget, what's in it? Student fee bill, right? Executive budget, so the money that we use every single day to add to the student experience, and then a more operational budget. I will say our board of directors definitely has a more integrate, I think, view and lens on the operational side of things. I think, they get to see more of the financial statements. They go through that very specifically with their auditors, as Ethan mentioned before, but council is still updated on this process. And so that's why we're kind of talking here today. So you're socialized to these concepts of what you can be expected and things like that. So ultimately, the budget is a plan and a promise to students that we are being responsible with their money and it's going towards the right things. So yeah. It's 2 slides actually now. Perfection. Okay. Budget considerations to think about, so what we can do and what we cannot do. The province of Ontario has established a framework for the collection of ancillary fees. Some fees we cannot change without a referendum. So a referendum is something that we use to increase and decrease fees because we are legally binded to do so if it's a certain amount. We are obligated to increase fees usually based on inflation, but we always prioritize students' wallets first. So it will never be something that has a huge percentage. Usually it falls around 1% to 2%, if anything. And then once the fee bill is approved by council, it cannot be changed. So you're the last, defense of the budget. So just something to kind of think about. And then bylaw 1 allows the incoming executive to reallocate spending within their portfolios as long as the bottom line doesn't change. And they then present those changes to summer council for approval. So last year's executive made edits, and the point to them was before they would basically give a budget to the next executive and be like, you can't change that. And I think that's a little bit difficult, especially if you have different presidential mandates, you have a different platform coming through. So having your budget set for you before you even start your job is a little bit confusing, I would say. But what I think I can predict for the next year is more so a bottom line. And they can choose how they would like to use the different lines in the budget based on needs that they might have for the year. So for example, if there's somebody who's really keen on, they want to do more presidential initiatives, they want to get out there and do less delegation with their executives. I hope not. It's really good to delegate to your executives, but could happen and they can make those decisions and they would have the autonomy to do so. So that was a really great change that I think was made last year. And then at the summer council meeting, we kind of talked about those changes. Okay, I think this is the last slide. No, it's not, sorry. Okay, your role. Where your input is needed and when. So February 2025, council will be tasked with reviewing and approving the executive budget and the fee bill. You should look at trends, identify priorities, and make sure spending is aligned with the strat plan. Don't get stuck in the weeds, please. This means you're less concerned with the individual numbers and more concerned with patterns and trends. As mentioned before, we work really heavily with professional organizations to oversee this. So council isn't the only governing body that is approving this. We have, like financial professionals who oversee this with us. We have a full-time staff who've been doing this for 20, 30 years. But the council is the line of defense that represents the student interest, and we really want to make sure that you're involved and included in that process. Okay, now this is the last slide. Next steps, what to start thinking about now. So first thing is getting feedback. Ask your constituents now how they want the USC to spend their money. I think it's good to kind of get feedback about where our line should be going. Should be more towards advocacy, engagement, all of these things. And honestly, the way that our budget has evolved over the years is based on feedback. So it's great to get informed, review past budgets, and ask questions if something doesn't make sense. I recognize that everyone here comes from different academic backgrounds, right? So we might have some Ivy people who read financial statements every single day, maybe not their texts apparently, really, really scary. But you have people who are in science, you have people who are in social science, all of these kinds of things. So, sorry, Saad. But from that, what I think is really important is everyone has different backgrounds. So I think it's really totally okay if you have questions more so about, the financial statements, you want to understand how to better read them, all of these things. There's no shame in that. It actually makes you a better counselor because you're asking the questions if you're unsure. So if you're unsure, we're all here. We have a great full-time staff behind us, and we're very much happy to help you. And then the last thing is to be prepared. Review the draft budget and when it's presented to February, and bring concerns and questions to the floor. Bring them to the floor, but also bring them ahead of time as well, right? I think the more that we can do prior to getting into this room, and I think that this group in particular is really wonderful at doing, shout out to Councillor Jan, I would say that it's a really great process to kind of get ahead of the curve and to start those conversations ahead of time, because it makes what we do in this room a lot more efficient, and it allows everyone to have more of a voice instead of us always maybe talking over each other and things like that, which I think we've done a really great job this year. So yeah, any other questions about the budget? It's a super important part of your job as a counselor to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. I can promise you that my executive and I are, but I think it's always good to do those checks and balances, and we're kind of happy to help you work through that process. Any questions? Awesome. Okay, bye.
All right, we will resume to our for action section of the meeting with our next motion from the External Affairs Standing Committee, the motion to approve the USC Pedestrian Safety and Transit Position Paper. The motion reads, whereas transit and pedestrian safety is an issue that affects all students and staff at Western, whereas the USC's transit policy and pedestrian safety policy are expired and outdated, whereas updated recommendations must be utilized in our advocacy to Western, the city, and the provincial and federal governments, be it resolved that Council pass the pedestrian safety and transit position paper. Are there any questions regarding this motion? Go ahead, President.
I would just like to pass my speaking rights over to Vice President Wakish Johnson, just so that she can go over the premise of this paper and give some more information prior to the debate period.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Is this? Yeah? Okay. So I know this is the first position paper that we're going over this year, so just a little bit of context on what that means, what that looks like. The USC has a whole series of what used to be called policy papers. We're moving to calling them position papers instead, because we're trying to really focus on prioritizing what goes in these papers. So this paper and all papers going forward throughout the rest of the term and hopefully continuing for years to come will be like slightly shorter than past papers, just because the goal is to ensure that all of the recommendations in here are things that both myself and the Vice President University Affairs and all of our successors are things that we can actually advocate on over the next 3 to 4 years while this paper is valid. So that, instead of kind of having a stance on any possible thing that could come up. So one thing that we hear a lot from our full-time staff is if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And so that was kind of a big part of the mentality in framing this paper. And it just makes for, again, a more clear and concise stance of what it actually is that we're advocating for on this topic. And then in terms of all the feedback that was brought during standing committee, I responded to all the comments on that copy, but after conversations with our full-time staff and our research and policy analyst, a lot of this is going primarily into the body text, and I responded with some of that rationale, but also happy to expand more on it if anyone has questions on that or anything else. That is my spiel. If there's any questions on that as well, let me know.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding the motion? Councillor Bobkowicz?
Sorry. Yes, I just had a question regarding the motion. I was reading through the fine print, and it said that it would be focused on, like, construction within the roads of London, specifically around Western. Are we making a declaration? Are we seeing a councillor or, like, a councillor of city council to, like, discuss and review what our options are? If you could maybe elaborate on that a little bit more.
Okay, I'm not 100%. Tell me if this answers your question. Okay. If not, clarify. But so the way that the reason we have position papers is so that it gives us the stances to advocate on. So I won't advocate on every single recommendation in this paper and in all of our other papers every year, but through my consultation process, as I was coming into this role, I kind of got a good gathering of what students see as priorities, and then that's also what we use our surveys for regularly throughout the year. And that's kind of when these happen. So when I do have my conversations with city councilors, this is primarily aimed at them. But if you go through the recommendations, some of them say the City of London should, or the London Transit Commission should, in which case that's who that recommendation is aimed at. Some of them say that Western University should, in which case that's more of something that University Affairs VP would be advocating on. And then there's, I think, one or two that are aimed at the federal and provincial governments as well. Does that answer that?
Yes, that did answer my question. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor. Sorry, I can't. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, my question is, how many people respond to these surveys, and would it be more effective to have these discussions in the council? Because I personally don't know that many people who fill out surveys, and we do a lot of them, and so maybe something like this is pretty important. I actually know many areas where there's issues with pedestrian safety, so maybe that could be better discussed in council versus through a survey.
I can't comment on the exact numbers of how many people filled out this survey. I don't know if anyone else on exec would be able to, but yeah.
Go ahead.
I can say that our surveys typically vary in response. I think for the most part, when we have a big push for position papers, we get hundreds of students that do fill it out. So it's not coming, the numbers are not coming from nothing. I think they also come from consultation, which Michelle talked about as well. So of course, open to more dialogue within the council floor, but I think that's also why having standing committee groups are so special, because we're able to have really intense dialogue there. So yeah, as for the surveys, I would say we get hundreds of students that do fill them out. It's different for every survey. We talked about this in standing committee for UA, but we had 6,000 people respond to our reading week survey, compared to when we did the club survey with MAP, we had about 500 people to 600 people respond. So it really does vary in what the topic is about, but you can be rest assured that the numbers don't come from nowhere, and there is a significant amount of people filling it out. And we also have the governance structure that we do with standing committees, so we can have those thoughtful conversations. But of course, if this is if you see something on the agenda that you want to add some more input on, you're always welcome to do that, and the further conversations are always welcome as well.
Yeah, I think that covered what I would have said.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the motion? Councillor Smith.
Hi. Yeah, you just mentioned consultations, and it's also, I noticed in the actual paper itself, that you would intend to hold regular consultations to inform advocacy. What do these consultations with regular students look like, and how do you advertise them to make sure you're representing the student body accurately?
So a good amount of what informed this did come from my consultations with outgoing and incoming counselors, so the group of you here, and then also last year's set of counselors. That's kind of where I was able to input my voice on behalf of students. But we also ran focus groups, and then again, the surveys as well, to me, count as a form of consultation because they have some like open text box where students are welcome to give feedback. I think the conversations had at standing committee as well, I would also classify as a part of that. Consultation does tend to be more extensive for longer and more nuanced papers. This paper, like a lot of the recommendations are somewhat similar to the paper that was expired and outdated. Yeah, I hope that answers that.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, it's just following up. Like, after the paper is presumably passed and in effect, do you like intend to continue student consultations to inform advocacy, or is it just going to stick to like this paper and then you just like make an advocacy push depending on what you see as the priority in that moment?
President Kalajian?
Yeah, so just to answer your question, I think that it is really important to stay continuously informed, but if we are consistently and always doing consultations on the same papers that we do every single year, I don't know if we have the capacity for that. I think that's why they do expire, right? And we recognize that something doesn't stay valid for years and years on end, which is why we do renew papers. But if we're doing consistent consultation on the same things every single year, it doesn't help our advocacy move forward. That being said, that's why this is being renewed. So that's, I mean, we're always open to dialogue if we think that there needs to be something that's updated, but I think we have to prioritize what's next, while also making sure that policy stances that we do have stay up to date, which is what we're doing here today by having this conversation and renewing the paper.
Also to add on to that, so a lot of the recommendations in this paper, like, for example, there's one surrounding having more, commit to increase it. It's recommendation number 6 that I'm going to reference, commit to increasing number and frequency of buses to and around campus during peak times, and many more words. But so that recommendation I think will remain valid for 3 years, but the specific routes that might need updating are where that stuff changes year to year, and that's the kind of thing that can kind of change as different vice presidents come and go, or even month to month, depending on what the city's working on. Whereas this recommendation itself, I think, will stay valid and relevant for 3 years.
Are there any other questions regarding the motion? Councillor John.
Thank you, Councillor Jan. So very quickly, please correct me if I'm wrong here. In the past few weeks, there have been certain bills from the Ontario government that prioritize roads over bicycle lanes, for example. In this specific paper, are we only talking specifically pedestrians, or does this also include other modes of transportation, like bicycle lanes? And are we also advocating for those?
So this one is just focused on pedestrians, like those walking. In terms of increasing use of like bike lanes or increasing like, again, other more like eco-friendly forms of transportation. And then also because those legislation changes are so new, and I think maybe it's something that could have gone in this paper if they had happened months ago, but it was just difficult because this paper had already gone through standing committee when that was like really being debated and considered. But we do have our environmental sustainability paper coming up next semester, so I think if we do want to develop a stance on those new pieces of legislation, that would be a good place for it.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding this motion? Okay, are there any amendments or points of debate to be made at this time? Okay, and are there any objections? Okay, councillors, please proceed to Echo 360 to vote. The motion passes. We now move to our next motion, the human rights-based divestment motion.
Point of information.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Jan. Just very quickly, I wanted to ask, in our agenda, at the very end, we have a section that we allow for questions from the audience. I was wondering, is it at all possible, or can we have a second question period that comes before we talk about my motion, just because I know there's many people in the audience, and I want to make sure all points are heard. So if anyone there does want to talk about it, we give them a chance to talk about it before we vote on it, because I see there's a certain level of discrepancy if we ask them to give their opinions after we already have voted on it.
So regarding the process for amending the motion, or amending the agenda, so procedurally, any amendments to the agenda have to be proposed during the agenda approval period, which took place during the first part of the meeting, prior to the agenda's approval. Since the agenda has already been approved as it stands during part 1, making changes to the order of content during this meeting isn't possible. The current order of the meeting is outlined in the standing orders of council, but any long-term changes to the agenda structure would require an amendment to the formal policy. So if this is something that council wishes to explore, it would be a motion to review and amend the relevant policy to be brought forward in a future meeting.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Councillor. Your name.
Councillor Merches.
Thank you.
So the potential motion, in my opinion, he worded it as we could swap the section from the start. In my opinion, we could add a section instead of swap a section to adopt in the agenda. I know we adopted the agenda, but that establishes the structure we will follow during the meeting, but it does not preclude amendments from being made through a proper motion, from my understanding. According to Robert's Rules of Orders, amendments to an adopted agenda are valid when brought as a motion and approved by the entirety of the council. So before adoption, changes can be made, like you said, without a motion, but after adoption, that's why there are amendments that can follow this formal process. Just want to speak, but this potential motion is particularly important as it seeks to move the community section or add it to occur before an important motion is discussed. Even if there's no immediate questions from the audience, it is essential to provide the community with an opportunity to speak at a point in the meeting where their input may be most impactful. For these reasons, the potential motion to amend the agenda is, I believe, in order and should be considered by the council, and the opportunity to make such amendments should be available to preserve fairness and rights of the council meeting.
I'm going to defer my speaking rights to our senior manager, Dane.
Okay, so Councillor, just to address this as sort of a matter of procedure, because the USC very much values the input of community, which is reflected in the inclusion of our questions and comments for community, which is codified, as our speaker has mentioned, in the general order of council, in our standing orders of council as part of the general meeting procedure. So the actual structure of the agenda itself is pretty particular and structured in this way for a very specific reason. In this sense as well, because this is a single meeting that we've split into two parts, the opportunity for community consultation and involvement is kind of meant to occur between when the original agenda is approved and when the meeting resumes. Additionally, because this is a general meeting, the focus is and should specifically remain on continuing efficiently to make decisions. For more robust public participation, other procedural tools such as holding a town hall or a community forum would probably be better fit for this. So again, it's not a matter of, well, it is a matter of how you would amend it. So in theory, can you put forward an amendment to try and change the order of the meeting? To a degree, but also because our actual meeting structure is codified in our policy, it is a matter of policy rather than a simple suspension of procedural rules. Does that kind of make sense? So again, we value like the input from the community, but this also isn't a community forum wherein public discourse becomes a part of the decision-making structure at the meeting. That public discourse should have happened before as part of the consultative process, as well as in between the meetings if it were important. That feedback is something that can, obviously be consultated and negotiated between community members and council representatives and is encouraged as part of that process. But in terms of the standing orders of council, it is not simply a matter of procedure. It is a matter of policy, which would require a formal policy motion to amend, which can't take place at the current meeting because it requires extensive conversation and additional consultation. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I just have a quick follow-up. So you're correct, consults have already happened. We've had many consultations. But another point of information, since you said we cannot swap the order, could we motion to include an additional section that comes prior to motion 6 for this meeting? As you mentioned, we can't swap something since it violates procedure.
Okay, so in effect, you would be motioning to suspend the current rules of council in addition to adding in another community input section, is that correct? Like the procedural application, it's not simply a motion to amend the procedure. You're asking to effectively suspend our rules as defined by the policy.
Before I speak, I see other hands, so I'd like to hear what others have to say first, if possible.
President Kalajian?
Yeah, I think the important part of this motion, and I know we haven't really gotten into it yet, we're still on the procedure element, but is that it really does engage with the community. And so I think that's one of the reasons why this is so important, I think, for this motion for council to consider, right? So if we pass it today, it doesn't close the door for community engagement. We want them to continuously engage with the actions that we're going to be taking moving forward. So if, procedurally we are not able to do this, which I totally understand where you're coming from, Dane, I think that what I would like people in the gallery to understand as well is that this is not closing the door on any conversation. It's actually going to open it even further. So that's what I'll comment there.
Councillor Smith?
I think this is a point of order, but could we not, but if the procedure cannot be changed, could we not just, if somebody in the gallery has something that any councillor thinks ought to be brought to discussion, like have a councillor yield time to somebody in the gallery?
So as a matter of procedure, members are only allowed to actually speak at the meeting. So normally, in a meeting, voting members are able and regular members are able to defer speaking rights to other members of council. In this case, members of the gallery are, except with the exception of resource members, are not general members. So they actually can't speak to matters of the assembly. Again, that discourse is reserved for a different forum. This forum is kind of more limited in terms of community participation and consultation. So we, although value the input from the community, we want to keep the focus on council's discussion. And again, keeping the door open for consultations before, during, and after these meetings to inform iterations. Okay.
For the sake of Councilor Mauritius, just for the sake of giving council the chance to consider this, I would like to move to suspend the council's procedure to allow the introduction of an additional section for community members to speak prior to motion 6 for the sake of giving council the chance to consider this.
I have to the speaking right back.
Okay, deferring back to Dane.
Yeah, so just procedurally, again, as you've brought it forward, as it stands, council would have to approve this via a supermajority vote. So yes, you can motion for this, but council, you will have to vote with that consideration in mind.
Okay, are you putting forward the motion? Okay. And then a seconder, Councillor Jan. Okay, so this will require a 2/3 majority to suspend council procedure. All those in, are there any questions regarding this motion? Go ahead, Councillor, sorry, I can't, Thompson.
Elsie Thompson. Would you find it sufficient if we took a recess? You could speak to people in the gallery, get their opinions, and bring them forward on their behalf. They say we don't have to suspend our entire policy, do this vote, and maybe ruin the things that are instilled here on purpose to keep our meetings running daily. You can still talk to people in the gallery, get their opinions, and bring it forward on their behalf. That may be a less drastic method of making sure they're still included.
Are there any other questions regarding this motion? Go ahead, Councillor. Thank you. Sorry.
Just to this point, I do see the merit in what these councillors are speaking on. I understand trying to get some background information before we go forward and do our vote. But my question as well is, before the creation of this as a motion to be a survey, when it was drafted as a referendum, there was consultation provided too, right? So I almost wonder if the people that are here also already have their background information given as forth, which was then used as context for the conversations we had in committee and then also now. Likewise, though, I see merit in either option. If the will of the council is that we follow, I see that it happens, and that's fine. But my thoughts are just, is the context that is to be provided by spectators today something that was already considered in the drafting of the referendum and then the survey and now the motion? I yield my time.
Are there any other questions regarding the introduction of this motion?
Point of information.
Go ahead,
May I
Councillor.
respond to the question?
Yes.
Okay. Just to respond to both questions, just for the sake of giving council the opportunity to consider this as a potential path, I will say I stand by it. Yes, we did have consultations. I've had my own consultations. We all have, and you are correct in the sense that gallery members may already know what they're for or against. But just for the sake of putting that pathway out, just for council to vote, be it for, against, really quickly, we could just look at that. That's my input.
President Kalajian?
Totally understand where you're coming from. I do think that one thing that I want to really draw attention to as well is the reason that we do have the structure, as Dane mentioned. We give that week time, as you mentioned before, for the consultation piece, and I totally agree. And I think there's a lot of people here in the gallery, and if they would like to speak, the last thing I want to do is make someone feel like they're silenced. But there is procedure for a reason, and I think I don't want to keep stepping away from procedure, which is how we got to this motion in the first place, from going from referendum to this and to that, and setting good precedent. So I just want to make sure that for next time, everyone does know the specific rules that we do follow with our governance. I think really important to follow governance, but again, I don't want anyone to feel silenced if they're here to have conversation. I totally understand, but just thinking about next time and for future, we want to make sure that we are following the procedure that we have in place. Council meetings used to just be one meeting, a straight shot, and didn't really give the opportunity to consult, which is why we did it this way. So I really want to be able to use the structure that we have in place for the reason that it is there. But again, I want to make sure people feel included in the process, and I know that this is a very particular motion that can bring up a lot of sentiment, but again, want to remind people of why that's in place and all the messages that Dane already conveyed to you. So,
Are there any other questions regarding the introduction of the motion from Councillor Sarofian? You have a question? Go ahead. Oh, can you speak into the mic? Sorry. Thank you.
Is it okay to state a comment?
After questions, we will take amendments and points of debate, if that's what you are looking for. Are there any other questions regarding the introduction of the motion by Councillor Sarofian? Okay. Are there any amendments to the introduced motion or points of debate to be made at this time? Councillor Lee?
We're doing amendments and points of debate, right?
Correct.
My name is Councillor Lee. I'm against the motion in principle because I think when we have consults as councillors, for us to have like like motions that have a lot of discussion, and for us to say that we need to suspend our procedures just to bring in people to speak, that takes away from our role as counselors who are supposed to be doing consults prior to these meetings in the week we have between the two meetings. I feel like if we say that we're doing consults and we're representing our constituents, but we also need to bring in constituents here to speak and suspend our procedure just to do that, we're undermining our own ability to represent them.
Are there any other points of debate or amendments to be made at this time? Councillor Smith.
I would agree with Councillor Lee there, and I also think that it might be considered that it might be disadvantageous to anyone else in the Western community who would have come to this meeting if they had believed that they would have speaking rights or an ability to provide input, but who are instead trusting their councillors to represent them in favor of the people who happen to come to this. So I think it might actually be representing the community in a less unbiased way than it should. And I think, therefore, that we should probably proceed forward with the rules as they usually are. And if something comes up that is so contentious that you would like to immediately consult, during a debate, we can always, remember that there is a possibility, as Councillor Thompson said, to motion for a recess. If it is, absolutely urgent, we can consider that at the time.
Point of objection or amendment? Is that what it is, Councillor? Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say and maybe comment that people are often better able to speak to things that they believe in. And while as counselors we're expected to bring the voice to the people, oftentimes they might be able to do it better, more justice than we ever were able to do. And also, I do want to say that if procedure brings us to a place where people feel silenced, then I would feel really uncomfortable with that.
Are there any other amendments or, okay, Councillor Malabanan.
Councillor Malabanan, I think a lot of good points are brought up, but I think we also have to think about just what precedents we're setting in terms of, do we just continue suspending Robert's rules when we want to put something forward to the table? And I think it's also just about us being a bit more proactive in terms of when we see the agenda items, when we're approving the agenda right at the very first moment, we look forward and we're looking ahead into what the agenda might be like, just because I think it would also just be bad governance to just continue suspending Robert's rules, because these procedures in the first place are made to hold us accountable and really just be able to bring forward the voices of our constituents. Whereas when we suspend Robert's rules, yes, they may have opinions, but I think it's also just what happens in the future. My point with that.
Are there any other points of debate? Councillor Yang.
In the future, because I feel like this is kind of last minute for our meeting for today, if there was a motion that came forward and there was a member of the community with maybe a personal connection or a reason to make a presentation related to the motion, I know members of the community can do that. Would that be something that we would be able to do?
Yeah, so point of information, if councillors feel that there is some sort of presentation that they'd like to introduce to council at the full USC meeting, they're able to submit that when we have our call for agenda items. So that would be the opportunity for someone external to give a presentation regarding what will be discussed and debated on. Are there any other points of debate to be made at this time? Go ahead, councillor.
Councillor Soto. So just a point of information for you guys. This amendment, again, I don't feel any type of way about it, but is there a speaking time assessed for it? Or are we just going to go until we feel satisfied? Just wanted to know.
As the mover, do you have a response to the question?
Although not initially introduced, I do envision a time of 10 minutes would be sufficient with the size of the gallery.
Are there any other points of debate to be made at this time? Are there any objections to be made at this time? Okay. So we will proceed to voting on the motion introduced by Councillor Seraphim. So just to be clear, can you please repeat the motion that you are introducing?
The motion as was introduced earlier I move to suspend the council's procedure to allow the introduction of an additional section for the community members to speak prior to motion 6.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, by raise of your placard, if you are in favor of this motion, please raise your placard now. And keep it up. Thank you, councillors. You can lower your placards. If you are voting against this motion, please raise your placard now and please hold it up.
Sorry, Councillor Malaban, just a point of order. Is the motion where, because you mentioned that the motion was to add in like a section within the agenda to allow allow the gallery to be able to speak right before this. I thought we were motioning on suspending Robert's rules. Because we can't vote on this motion without suspending Robert's rules, no? Because, yeah, procedurally, we can't.
Correct.
So I just don't know
yes.
what these votes were for.
So it's the... Okay, I'm going to defer again to Dane.
Okay, so just to clarify, when you motion to suspend Robert's rules, that means that whoever successfully suspends the rules is able to then introduce the new rule effectively, which is then voted on. So you are voting essentially in two parts. First, to suspend Robert's rules to allow for the creation of a new rule, and then the new rule is dictated by the counselor in question. Yeah, so you are currently voting to suspend Robert's rules to allow for the inclusion of a new procedural rule, which you will then vote on secondarily.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
Counselor Jenna, maybe I just don't know, but maybe before we do this, is there a way for us to know maybe if there is anyone in the gallery that even wants to have a question? So I'm just worried maybe we're just, because I don't know, but like maybe there is, I don't know. But if there isn't, maybe we're, no. But is there a way for us to know, like maybe we get like a raise of hand just so we know before we vote on this?
Yes.
Yes, when a point of order is made, we address it immediately. That's why we paused with the voting, because a point of order was made in the middle of the voting. So we paused the voting to then finish addressing the new point of order that was introduced. I'll defer back to Dane.
So just as a procedural suggestion, maybe once the current motion to suspend Robert's rules is voted on, I would maybe recommend motioning to potentially take a recess. If you're interested in consulting the gallery, then that way you can gather the information you need and then continue to vote on any amendments to the rules of order.
Also, point of
Yes.
information, would
Okay.
like to add that we haven't even had dialogue about this motion yet. So I think that's like a big piece. Like we haven't even really talked about it, or we don't even know if there's point to debate. We haven't fully fledged that out yet. So I'm just wanted to flag that we haven't even gone through the proper processes of the motion, and we might be surprised by what the outcome could be there. So just wanted to flag.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no more points of order, we will resume with voting on the motion introduced by Councillor Serofiem. So I'm going to ask that if you are voting against the motion, that you please raise your placard again. Thank you. You can put your placards down now. If you are voting to abstain on the motion introduced by Councillor Serofiem, please raise your placard and keep it up. We did not reach supermajority for the vote, so the motion does not pass, and we will resume back to reading the motion. The motion reads, whereas responsible investment is integral to Western University's values and the USC's mission of ethical governance, whereas on May 2nd, 2024, the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights presented a report, quote, urging investors to integrate human rights considerations into their environmental, social, and governance and sustainability approaches to align them with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, end quote. Whereas human rights considerations should form a critical component of responsible investing practices, whereas ongoing university investments in companies allegedly violating human rights standards could undermine Western's commitment to ethical practices, be it resolved that the USC formally advocates that Western University incorporate human rights considerations into its investment policy, specifically divesting from companies that engage in or are complicit in human rights abuses as defined by United Nations standards, including but not limited to weapons manufacturers. Be it further resolved that the USC conducts a campus-wide survey poll on this issue, which includes the question, quote, should the University Students' Council advocate that Western University incorporate human rights considerations into its investment policy, specifically divesting from companies that engage in or are complicit in human rights abuses as defined by the United Nations standards, including but not limited to weapons manufacturers, end quote. Be it further resolved, the USC runs a minimum 2-week informational campaign that begins a minimum of 1 week before the release of the survey to provide students with information to make an educated response. Be it further resolved that the USC bring the findings of the survey and their formal recommendations forward to significant university stakeholders. I now open this motion up to questions. Go ahead, Councillor Sharma. Sorry, can you speak into a microphone, please? Thank you.
Sorry. So my question is, how will the informational like campus-wide survey address initial misinformation or bias among students about human rights-based divestment?
Before I answer, I'll let President Collegian.
Go ahead, President Collegian.
So just wanted to also address the informational campaign and the survey. So this is something that I've talked to the author group about. So first thing first is that they would be included in that process. So the people who have taken the initial steps to do research, to take a step forward, and I think put a lot of of their hard work into this motion. I want to make sure that they're consistently working with the USC. It's super important to me that they feel like they're a part of the process. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the USC actually has a pretty comprehensive research team that works for us. So we will do a lot there to, like you said, represent and make sure that if there's any misrepresentation of information and things like that, we're able to kind of prevent, I think is like the biggest piece. So that's a huge one. And of course, consultation, getting people involved in these conversations as well. You know, Western administration's also very aware of this motion. I've had conversations with them too. And I think it's important to do our due diligence in that respect as well. So there's multiple parties that'll be included. I think most importantly, the authorship group. We want students to be at the forefront of this decision-making process, so they will be there. I hope that answers your question, and I think if anything I've missed, I know that there's a very capable person to help with that. So,
Thank you. I think President Legion got everything. Just a really quick thing about the biases part. I just wanted to mention that we did talk about this beforehand, and it was very much when we want the information-based campaign, we don't want a for campaign, we don't want an anti-campaign, just information-based. Give the facts and let students decide. Don't tell them what to do. Let them decide.
Are there any other questions regarding the motion? Councillor Sripapi.
To also add on to the answer, we also included a part where the informational campaign would start 1 week beforehand, before the actual voting period, so that people wouldn't be voting based on preconceived notions, and so that we can ensure as much information gets to people before they even look at the voting page.
President Kalajian.
Point of information, just not to correct you, but not voting. I think it's a survey, right? So it's a little more comprehensive. So just you're not doing nothing wrong, but just want to make sure that people do know that it's more of gathering information, not a yes or no. The USC will be doing this no matter what, because we're now going to be mandated to this motion if it passes. So regardless if people vote yes or no, it's still something that we're going to bring forward in a summary, in a comprehensive summary. So you're totally correct. Just wanted to make sure that that was represented properly, because your points were amazing. So.
Are there any other questions regarding this motion? Councillor Dreschner.
I'm wondering what Western University is currently doing that's contributing to human rights abuses, and which companies it's funding that commit those human rights abuses.
Councillor Jen, go ahead.
Thank you for your question. So in the summer, Western University released their endowment funds and where what money they put in what companies, what portfolios, and what their market equity is. This motion is more so for in general, as the constituents asked for a motion that even today or tomorrow or 10 years down the line, if there ever comes a portfolio that does break human rights considerations, we don't invest in them. But to answer your question for today, the two main portfolios that were seen in the endowment funds that were the biggest point of concern for our constituents, or my constituents in this case, was number one, Lockheed Martin, which is a weapons manufacturer, and number two was Airbnb, which is boycotted by the UN. Does that kind of answer your question?
I actually have a follow-up to that. Why is the university not currently engaging in practices that, don't hurt human rights? I feel like we're at Western, but we're in a Western university, and I think most Western universities that are free in North America actively practice practices that, promote human rights and things that won't violate, basic standards of, our communities. And so why is Western failing at that? And why do you think we need to do this to push them to do that?
I think that's a great question, and I have the same question for Western. But in this case, I have no influence at Western on who they invest in. This was something that we saw was where Western was investing, which we disagree where they should be investing. So that's why we're bringing this up. As for the reasons why they're already investing in them, you'll have to ask Western that.
Are there any other questions regarding this motion? Councillor Bobkowicz.
Hi, so just really quickly, you mentioned information sessions. I was wondering what exactly that would look like, and if there maybe be any extenuating circumstances for affiliates, for instance? Like, would we find it at the UCC? If so, how would we, extend that to our branches at least?
I'm not even going to look on my right, but I already know there's a hand up there.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yes. President Kalajian, go ahead.
We have some good chemistry going on over here, right? So as well as the authors, I've talked to Rick and Carl, and they're also going to help out with this, just because I think obviously they know the affiliates a little bit better than me, even though I try to understand all the lore, but I can't catch up on everything. So I think it's really important that they do have a centralized option to bring over some of the communication to affiliates. So you'll hear more from them as to what that might look like. But just for timeline too, I think this is also helpful to know. It would be in January. So we would start meeting with the authorship group, with the affiliates. I'm very cognizant of elections. I think that's going to be something that this will come after the election, just because I would think this needs to have its own centralized attention. So this will be something that I think will probably come up more so after reading week time, things along those lines. But as for the informational campaign, affiliates, we will not forget about you. You're very much going to be included in the conversation, so much so that the initial meetings that we have about what this informational campaign would look like, your presence will be involved.
Perfect, thank you.
Are there any other questions regarding this motion? Okay. Are there any points of debate to be made at this time regarding the motion? Councillor Jen.
I am so sorry, guys. I'm sure you're sick of me talking at this point. Last meeting, as a motion to amend. Last meeting, we had a question about which exact rules are we talking about, what guiding principles are we talking about. And I answered that next week I'll bring in a motion to amend, because in the original motion, there were those appendices. I just forgot to add them on the new one. So I had a motion to amend here. At the very end of this motion, I sent the speaker a link. I don't know how I can send this to everybody else, but it's basically actually mentioning which, everything that we're claiming in this motion, basically have a reference for that. So we know everything has a reference and claims proof for that. So in this case, the three big ones are going to be, when it says UN guiding principles, we'll actually mention UN human rights documents and guiding on principles of businesses documents. So all that stuff. In the initial parts where we say other universities have had this approach to, actually mention which universities and give the documents for what they have done. Basically, just so it's a very more thorough. Nothing in the motion itself has changed, just putting on a bibliography. So just like professors, so they don't give me an F.
Can I please have a seconder to introduce the motion to amend? Councillor Sharma. Are there any questions regarding the motion to amend the original motion? Councillor Smith.
This is more procedural than anything, but is it the appendix that appears on like the one that is linked in the agenda?
I don't believe so yet, because I don't know if we have added that in by governance. No, we haven't. Speaker, any chance that you can send everyone the, so I've already sent them the updated motion with the appendix in it. If they can send it over to everybody else, that'd be great. Thank you.
So we've just put it in Slack, and we will also be putting the, we will put it in the agenda as well. Are there any other questions regarding this motion? Or, sorry, I apologize. Questions regarding the amendment to the original motion? Are there any are there any points of debate to be made regarding the amendment to the motion? And finally, are there any objections to the amendment to the motion? Okay, by show of placards, please raise your placard if you are voting for the amendment, or for motioning for the amendment. Thank you, councillors. If you are voting against the motion to amend, please raise your placard. Sorry, were you a motion to, okay. So again, I ask if anyone would like to motion against the motion to amend, please raise your placard. Okay, and are there any, now please raise your placard if you would like to abstain to the motion to amend. Okay, the amendment passes. So now we are back to, Are there any other points of debate to be made to the original motion at this time? Councillor Ejam.
Councillor Jenna, hello everyone. I want to start off by saying that I'm really one of the co-authors, and I will be speaking for this motion. I really want to emphasize that this motion is a direct reflection of student voices and has been shaped by consultations that I also helped in conducting with over 200 students across faculties and USC leaders. Through the consultations, it has been very clear that students don't want their money for tuition to be invested in companies that go against their values and want Western to align its investment policy with human right considerations, specifically to urge divestment from companies complicit in human rights abuses and weapons manufacturing. By having a campus-wide survey and a neutral informational campaign, we'll be able to gather an even greater unbiased student feedback on this issue. This approach of having a survey addresses concerns about the limitations of binary decisions and allows us to really capture the diversity of student perspectives. It also ensures that our advocacy is informed and grounded in the value of our community, which makes this part of the motion very important. Passing this motion demonstrates the USC's commitment to human rights and social responsibility while reinforcing trust in Western's ethical commitments. It's a call for action that aligns Western's investments with the very principles it promotes to its students. I'm hopeful that this motion will gain your support as it reflects a thoughtful and collaborative process that is truly based on student voices, and a lot of work has gone into the making of this motion to ensure that it is. Together, we can advocate for Western's investments to align with the values of the student body. This motion is an opportunity for USC to show that student voices can drive meaningful change. By advocating for ethical investments, we reaffirm our commitment to human rights and set a precedent for accountability and action. It's a clear message that students' values matter and should play a part in shaping the policies of our university.
Are there any other points of debate to be made at this time? Okay. Are there any objections to be made at this time? Okay. Please proceed to Echo 360 to vote on the motion. And I remind Council that the amended version is on the agenda. Echo 360 has the original, but you are voting on what is in the agenda, which is the amended version of the motion. The motion passes. We will now move on to hear any questions or comments from the Western community. Yes. President Kalajian, would you like to respond?
I really appreciate your comment there. I will tell you that the USC in particular has completely divested in fossil fuels. So that's something that I can make the assertion to for that. As my vice president mentioned before, our environmental sustainability paper is up for renewal for next semester. So that's definitely something that we can further address, as I know it's something that's really important to students and that we can kind of action in that. So I really take what you say to my heart, and we can definitely move that forward within our position paper for the next semester.
Are there any other questions or comments from the Western community? Are there any new business items to be introduced to the floor at this time? Please keep in mind, council, only time-sensitive items will be considered. We can now move to terminate the meeting. Can I please have a mover, President Kalajian, and a seconder? Councillor Jen. Are there any objections to terminating the meeting? Okay. Seeing as there are no objections, the meeting is terminated at 9:09 p.m. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Great stuff.